Welcome to Ag Matters, covering positive agriculture stories from across Alaska on Big Cabbage Radio.
Hello, everybody. You're listening to Ag Matters. I'm your host, Kevin Hoffman. I have a farm out in Palmer called Matsu Microgreens where we grow gourmet vegetables year-round and also some outdoor vegetables in the summer. But I'm also the executive director of the Alaska Farm Bureau. So if you're a farmer out there or if you want to become a farmer, you could visit our website at alaskafb.org and join and become a member. It's great networking. So today we have a friend of mine calling in, Petra, with Alaska Rhodiola. So Petra, thanks for calling in.
Well, good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, for sure. So if you wouldn't mind getting started talking about yourself, how you ended up in Alaska, and going into how you started your company.
Sure. So first of all, thank you for this opportunity. Problem is, 20 minutes may not be long enough for me. I could talk for hours about rhodiola, but we'll keep it short. I'm a physician here. I've been here for 25 years. I came to Alaska through the WWAMI program, which is the Alaskan-based medical school through the University of Washington in Seattle. So I came up 25 years ago to open my practice in aviation medicine, which is basically doing medical exams for pilots. And, I grew up in South Dakota. My childhood was, hanging out with farmers. And so I always had this warmth for farmers. And when I came up here and realized the farming activity primarily in the Matsu and on the Kenai, I was really impressed. But I also realized that, farming is hard, but it's even harder up here where lots and lots of things don't grow. And I stumbled across an article on Rhodiola rosea in one of my science magazines back about 2008, I think. And I was really intrigued as a physician about its health benefits and also its history of use among native circumpolar people. And I just had this idea about, golly gee, maybe we can grow this in Alaska. Farmers in Alaska struggle growing things here that really don't like growing here or need extra care to extend the growing season, greenhouses and tunnels and all kinds of expensive infrastructure. And here's a plant that potentially had high economic value because it was very valuable in medicine community. And so I just put two and two together and thought, let's see if we can cultivate it. And so I basically did a little research and discovered that they had already been doing this in Alberta, Canada, with the Alberta Rhodiola rosea growers organization. And they had a scientist that was funded by their provincial government to try to figure out how to grow it. So I got a handful of seeds from him and tried it myself. And in the course of a couple of years in the late 2000s, I put out 100,000 plants in my front yard. So not having a terrible green thumb, I figured if I can do it, then farmers can do it. And then I had a problem. I had 100,000 plants I needed to get rid of. So I started elbowing my way into various conferences and meetings and convinced a couple of intrepid growers, farmers, to give it a try. And fast forward, now we have a handful of farmers and several acres in production. So that's how that got started.
Amazing. So describe for us Rhodiola rosea. First off, how do you spell it so that if people are curious, they can Google it? And then what does it look like and how long does it take to get a crop?
Yeah, rhodiola is spelled Rhodiola. And there are about 90 or 100 rhodiola species, and this one is Rhodiola rosea, Rosea.
Okay.
It's not the rhodiola that's native to Alaska. There is a rhodiola species here that you can find, around this area. You find it up on Hatcher Pass and other areas where it's, at around 3,000 or 4,000 feet elevation, and the further north you go, you'll find it at lower elevations because it is a subarctic alpine plant that requires, a good cold winter and mild summers. The species here is Rhodiola integrifolia, which also has been used by native peoples in Alaska, but it has different medicinal properties. It's a sedum plant, which is a thick, fleshy leaf plant, and the Rhodiola rosea grows to about 12 to 16 inches in height at maturity, and every year it gets larger, not necessarily much taller, but larger in circumference. And it requires, in its native habitats in, the mountains of Siberia and Central Asia, because where it grows is so harsh, it can be many decades old when it's big enough to be of value to be harvested. And that's another point I want to get to here in a moment. But when you grow it and nurture it, in slightly milder conditions, like where humans live and farm, you can get it to maturity in about 4 to 5 years. So the reason I wanted to mention the wild harvest is this is a critical feature as to why it's so valuable for cultivation. Until recently, most of the world's supply of rhodiola has come from wild harvest for the botanical industry. And because these plants are so old when they're dug up, and it's the root of the plant that's used, so it's a destructive harvest. You kill the plant. It has actually been placed on an internationally agreed upon endangered species list. And this is the CITES organization, the Convention of International Trade of Endangered Species. So subsequent to that, companies are pivoting to getting cultivated rhodiola. And that's another reason why it is, such a potential valuable agricultural product for Alaska.
Okay, so you said Alberta is another region where they're farming it. Are there any other regions around the world? Are they growing them in the northern states in the lower 48?
Not to my knowledge, although I think there might be a small group of rhodiola growers in Vermont, but because it's a subarctic alpine plant, you can't really grow it much further south. I guess in the Rockies, the higher up you go, you can probably grow it there as well, but it also does better, with the intense summer daylight that we have. So the further south you go, the plant really, loses out on that latitude. And it's not just the climate, it's also the latitude that it needs. So there are other cultivation projects in Europe, in Germany. For example, I just visited a rhodiola grower that's starting out in Poland. I discussed this prior to the Ukrainian war with people in Ukraine. We've had visitors from Iceland. So there are other places where it's being cultivated, and I suspect it's also being cultivated more and more in Russia and China, although with the current geopolitics, it's really hard to get any information on that.
Okay. So you said 4 to 5 years before harvest. How many farmers do you have supporting your business? Because as I understand, Alaska Rhodiola, you specialize in the value-added product, or do you also farm the rhodiola as well?
Well, my business partner is Al Poindexter at Anchor Point Greenhouse, and so he is also growing it. I think he put in 12 acres recently. We have some other growers that we purchase from on the Kenai particularly. There are other folks starting in the Mat-Su, but unfortunately, there's really no co-op or association yet. So it's hard to know exactly who's doing what. And this is actually an area where I think we need to improve because this is new territory and there's really no, handbook on how to grow rhodiola. So I think people are trying to do it on their own and figuring it out on their own. And I'm just hoping that we can eventually get some sort of, rhodiola community pulled together where we can share information. But what I have done early on, I was basically acting as a broker for the growers, connecting them to botanical companies that were small enough that would be interested in the small harvests that we can produce here. Mind you, I get emails periodically from companies all over the world wanting like 10 metric tons of dried root, and I'm like, I have 500 pounds. So it was hard to connect, to find the right size botanical company. So I did that for a few years, and then the light bulb went on, and I thought, man, we're just losing out on all this value-added component. And, for example, I think it was in 2014, thereabouts, I was packaging up about 400 pounds of dried root, powdering it up, putting it in packages, getting it ready to ship off. And at that time, the going price was $25 a pound, which actually was twice the price of Chinese rhodiola. So already by having it grown here, people were willing to pay more. But nonetheless, I was packaging this up. The farmer was very happy to get a check for 10 grand. And then I did the math as to how many capsules that company was going to make and estimated the pricing of what they would probably put it out for. And that was about $1 million worth in retail product. And so that's the last time I did that. And I decided to make our own product. And so I spent a couple of years formulating a tincture, and that was our first product and has been very, very popular. And now we are expanding into making capsules of two kinds. One is basically a powdered dried root, and then we built an extraction facility here in Anchorage, with scientific instrument, quality equipment to extract the root material out of the tincture, basically removing the alcohol in the water from the tincture and getting it down to a purified dry powdered extract from which we can make other products like highly potent capsules, using it as an ingredient for other products.
That's amazing.
So
it sounds like demand is outstripping supply, both on the value-added side, but also with the raw material, the producing side. So how many more farmers do you need to start growing this for you to help your business?
Well, and it's not just my business. I think as many farmers as want to do this can sell their products. Their harvest, whether it's to us. Right now we're making about 70 to 80,000 tincture bottles a year. And, that's kind of a nice little business, but it's not enough to be of interest to like Whole Foods. We'd need, probably hundreds of thousands of bottles to attract the attention of Whole Foods. But there are so many other companies out there that are willing to purchase high-quality root, dried root from farmers directly. So it's not just supporting my business, which, I'd be delighted if it grew, but there's opportunity here, in my opinion, for Alaska to become, a leading producer of high-quality cultivated rhodiola. So other countries are doing it. Germany is doing it big time, but they have the government subsidizing all this. And, we don't have that leverage. So it is, the companies who are calling for metric tons of rhodiola. So there are many, many other options for farmers to make money off of this rather than just to selling it to us, although we're happy to purchase whatever we can.
So what's the dream organizational structure that you would love to see here in the state? For instance, I'm with the Alaska Farm Bureau. What is something that the Farm Bureau could do to help rhodiola industry here?
Well, education and maybe some sort of, grant support and marketing. I kind of took a sign from the peony growers. I mean, when I first moved here 25 years ago, I was so pleased to see that. And Pat Holloway of UAF had put an enormous amount of effort and energy into helping the peony growers understand how to do this. And, and they're well established. And I think Rhodiola could use the same sort of support. We need basic ag research. That's something I would think that that UAF would be interested in. There's so many questions on how do you produce higher potency, bigger roots, weed control, all those sorts of things. As a matter of fact, we have a fellow in Eagle River who is doing research on aeroponics for seedling production. So research would be huge. UAF support would be huge. Helping farmers learn more how to distribute that information. My big fantasy is for Alaska to become the leading producer of cultivated rhodiola for the world. I think we could do it.
Amazing. So you said it takes about 4 to 5 years to grow. Mm-hmm. Is it profitable for farmers to grow it up here? What are the numbers for, say, one rhodiola plant? And how many rhodiola plants can you produce on an acre?
It depends on, how the structure of that farm is. I can't tell you profit because every farmer has different financial challenges. I would say if somebody is going to go out and buy property and clear it, that's a long-term investment. That's not something you're going to make money in 5 years because you have to capitalize that, right? But we know that obviously the bigger the root and the higher the concentration of the marker ingredients, specifically called rosavins, the more valuable that plant is. And if it's certified organic, that makes a big difference for companies too. But basically, just rough estimate, you can get about 12 to 15-ish thousand plants into an acre. And depending on the size and the rosavin concentration of those roots, I mean, that's probably something like $150,000 worth of material. I mean, these are all very rough estimates because every farm is different.
Amazing. So tell us more about your tincture and your products. Where do you sell your tinctures?
Well, we sell it online. We have a very busy online store, and we also sell it on Amazon. Actually, recently it was pushed up to the most popular Amazon Rhodiola tincture. And we also sell it at a variety of stores here in Alaska, Natural Pantry for one, All About Herbs in Wasilla, Sunshine Foods in Fairbanks, and if there's a small health food store in Alaska, you can probably find the tincture in it. We're looking for other opportunities in the lower 48 for other small, particularly mom and pop stores, simply because we don't have the volume yet for things like Whole Foods.
Mm-hmm. So how can people follow you guys? Do you guys have a social media presence or a website?
Yeah, we do. Our website is AK Roseroot. Stands for Alaska, and Roseroot is a kind of a generic name for rhodiola. It's called Roseroot because when you cut the root freshly, it has kind of a rose-like odor. Or you can just Google Alaska rhodiola and it'll come up. We have a Facebook, we have a very busy Instagram, and we have a YouTube channel as well with lots of information on there, not just, marketing information, but lots of information for educational information. We also have a 1-hour movie that we made, a documentary called The Road to Rhodiola. You can access it through our website or I don't think it's on the YouTube channel yet because it does cost $9.99 to view it. We had to kind of recover some of our costs in producing that. But lots of information, and through our website is a primary place to get to it, or the YouTube channel.
Excellent. Do you have any upcoming events or workshops or presentations through the winter?
Yes. Let me see if I have the calendar on that. There is hold on a moment, there is a small business, I wasn't quite prepared for this, meeting January 31st and February 1st, and then also at the Alaska Farm and Garden Show, which I'm trying to remember the dates of that. I have
If it's
it
the
written
one
down
out here in
somewhere.
Palmer, that's January
Yeah.
31st to February 1st.
Oh, that's the one.
Yep.
Yeah, but there's also another small business meeting a little bit later in the month. I'd have to look that up.
Excellent.
I don't have that at the tip of my fingers.
I'm sure you'll have it on your social media or your website.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, is there anything else that you want the listeners to know about rhodiola or the tincture or just anything?
Well, like I said, I could talk for hours, and I don't want to, waste your time. But I'm happy to explain anything to anybody if they want to give us a call or send me an email. My email is akroseroot@gmail.com. People who want to know its health benefits as well as how to grow it. So, you're welcome to give me a shout, and I'd be happy to chat with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Petra, for taking the time to talk to us. I'm sure our listeners will really enjoy it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity, Ken. Appreciate it.
For sure. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening to Ag Matters.
You've been listening to Ag Matters, covering positive agriculture stories from across Alaska. Ag Matters is a production of Radio Free Palmer, recorded at our studios in Palmer, Alaska. For more information about this program, email manager@radiofreepalmer.org.